Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. I hope you're having a good day. Today we're going to do a bird sketch, and I'm using one of the reference photos from the Artist Photo Reference Songbird Edition. Now, this is a series of books, the Artist Photo Reference. I've mentioned it before. Maybe you've picked up some of these books. This is the one I've paid the most for. I think I paid $25 for this book. But in general, I've collected the collection over the last couple of decades. I originally bought some of these artist photo reference books back in the 90s from Northlight Books, and I think I've had 2 or 3, and then I completed the collection buying them used on Amazon. So I highly recommend this series of books if you're looking for reference material, especially if you're kind of like me and you go online looking for a reference photo and then you get sucked into the rabbit hole that is the internet, and 2 hours later you have no reference photo, you have lost all of your time to create, and is it just me or does it happen to other people? So anyway, I love reference books for this reason, and these are designed to use in your art so you don't have to worry about copyright. So I'm just using this little one of the pictures of a sparrow. I thought it would be kind of fun, that one on the bottom. I thought it's kind of a cute pose, and I'm sketching with a Faber-Castell matte black pencil. So I got to tell you here, what I had in my mind and what came out on the paper are miles and miles apart. And so you're going to see me make a big mess and hopefully fix it. I'm doing a voiceover after the fact, but I decided to keep it in real time because I think sometimes it's nice to see the progression in real time. And honestly, when I was filming this, I thought that if I just focused on the drawing and the painting and didn't focus on filming, I bet I would paint a lot faster, because I do tend to paint and draw a lot faster when I'm not trying to explain as I go. And I guess I did. However, I didn't get what I kind of had in my mind's eye. What I had in my mind's eye was some really bold pencil marks and then some really loose watercolor. And I guess I had those things, but I think I went a little too overboard with the watercolor, and I should have left a lot more white space. But all this to say is we're going to go through it. You're going to see how I kind of sketched this in real time. I actually really like how the legs came out on this, which is kind of funny. And I didn't like it at the fact, but after the fact, when I look back at the sketch, I really loved the way that I drew the legs. And I think it's because there's a really great shot of the legs. I can see them pretty clearly, so I was able to take my time and really observe it, and that's what I was trying to do here, just undistracted. And I do like the way the legs came out. I didn't have enough contrast, and as you can see in the photo, there's not a lot of contrast, right? We've got this brown bird with a lot of brown in the background on a branch, on like the branch that he's on is very light, but still there's not a ton of contrast. And I think it's kind of difficult to make a picture look interesting when there's not a lot of contrast. And so if I had just hinted at the branch and just left out the background and left out most everything except for the bird, I think it would have been a better composition. But the only way we realize what works and what doesn't work is by trying different things. And so I decided to post this because we don't always come out of the gate with something we love. And sometimes we fail, but when we fail, we learn. And I'm not even calling this drawing a failure. I'm not going to call this painting a failure. Because I did learn. I learned that this was not getting me the effect that I want. And sometimes that's what you learn. You learn that this ain't it. And that's okay. That's okay. The thing that I love about doing a monthly challenge, and I'm doing World Watercolor Month right now, is that it gives you a new fresh start every single day. It's like January 1st, every single day. You got a new chance to do something else. And then at the end of the month, you'll have this body of work of 31 paintings, and they're not all going to be great, but some will be really good, and hopefully you'll see a progression by the beginning, day 1, to the 31st day in your skills overall. It's kind of like if you've ever done any sort of workout challenge, and like day 1, man, maybe you can't do a push-up, and then by 4 weeks later you're doing a few push-ups, maybe 20 push-ups. Who knows? I can't do a push-up, so that's probably a really bad analogy. But you may backtrack some days. Some days you may be like, oh my word, I'm doing worse than the day before. I feel like I've just taken 5 steps back. But overall, that trend is going to go upward, even if you do have a few hiccups and you do have a few dips. I didn't plan on doing any erasing, but I did have a few wrong marks, so I decided to get rid of them because at this point I'm still thinking I really want my pencil lines to show. I wanted bold pencil lines. That's why I'm using A10B black matte pencil. By the way, I want to mention, because I just had my eyes checked today, I had my yearly exam, and my prescription hasn't changed. But one thing that I did last year after my eye exam was I ordered a pair of reading glasses because I was using progressives, and I had a pair of progressives and a pair of bifocals because I wasn't sure exactly which one I preferred. And I ordered reading glasses, and if you wear prescription glasses and you're kind of at the age where you're needing bifocals or progressives, getting a pair of reading glasses for painting is a game changer. And I hate to say game changer because that's so overused, but for me it really was a game changer. And I find that now I will use my reading glasses, or a lot of times I just will wear no glasses, or I'll wear my reading glasses for when I'm working or reading, and it's just so much nicer. When I wear my progressives and I'm trying to read, I feel like I have to hold my head back and I'm looking down just the bottom part of my lenses. It's kind of uncomfortable. So that's something I would just recommend if you are at a certain age and maybe you don't wear glasses and you're feeling like it's difficult to see what's on the page. Consider some reading glasses. They don't have to be expensive. You can find them at any pharmacy. I have friends that get them at the dollar store. They say they're just the same as a pharmacy. I don't know because I've always had a prescription lens, but a $20 pair of reading glasses can make a huge difference in the enjoyment of your art. Now, actually, I think the sketch is pretty good. I have no qualms with the sketch. The paint that I'm using here, you're actually going to hear more about this paint in a few days when I finish out my review. But I was pulling these older paints out because they were a tube set from Paul Rubens probably about 6 or 7 years ago called the Song or Floral Collection. And I really liked these tubes, especially in comparison to their original pan paints. Well, they just came out with a set of this. They came out with this color range in a pan set. And I was really excited to try it. And I'd been using it for the past week. I've done probably 4 or 5 different paintings with it, and I just wasn't feeling it with those paints. And I'm like, man, I remember really liking the tube set. So I got the tube set out today to try. And even though it's not a bunch of floral colors I'm using here, the earth tones in the old tube set were so much better. And that's what I wanted to test because the earth tones in the pan set were not very robust. So that's why I have this set out. And I kind of forgot how much I enjoyed this set. Oh, and I found out something that you may find kind of interesting, especially if you love granulating colors. If you have hard water, or you have a friend that lives in a house that has a well and they have hard water, ask them to fill up a water jug for you before they change the salt in their water softener, because that water is going to have minerals in it that will make your paint granulate a lot more. And it may be a desirable effect and it may be an undesirable effect. And I'll tell you, it's an undesirable effect if you're using like cheap watercolors and they're just kind of getting gritty and silty, or if you're using like liquid watercolors, meaning like the pigmented ones, like the Dr. P.H. Martin's Hydrus ones, they'll get this kind of weird grain to them. But for a granulating watercolor, it makes things granulate insanely. And it was funny because I noticed that our water softener was in need of changing. And I also filled up my water buckets, and this is not for this painting, but for a different one. I filled up my water bucket with the cold water tap in our master bedroom. And I don't often use a cold water tap because we're so far away from the water heater that it takes a long time for the water to get hot. So I usually always just use the hot water tap because it'll be cold for a few minutes. So I'll fill up my water bottles while it's still cold, and then I'll get the hot water afterwards. So the cold water rarely gets used, and that water was so hard in those pipes that I was getting extreme granulation. So I just wanted to mention that in case you know somebody that's got hard water and you want to get a jug of water from them, because it does give you some pretty interesting effects. Salt water, oddly enough, salt water can also give you a more intense granulation and also a more vibrant color. So that's kind of fun too sometimes to try, which is weird because you use salt to soften your water, but it doesn't make salt water. It's different. But both of those things, it must be the minerals in the salt and the minerals in the hard water that give you that effect. Just something to give you something to try, because there's so many different variables, especially with the trend of the granulating watercolors. There's so many variables on how much that color is going to granulate for you. What are you using for paper? Is your paper rough? That's going to be more granulating looking. Is your paper heavily sized? If so, it's going to give you a more granulating look. If your paper is smoother and softer size, you're going to get much less of an effect. But if you like a smoother wash and you want to avoid granulation, using like a soft press or a hot pressed paper that's not superly well sized can give you more of the look you're after. It's really interesting as you dive deep into supplies and choosing what complements your style the most, what you end up settling down on, because I hear it all the time. This is the best paper. This is the best paint. This is the best this. This is the best that. And I got to tell you, there is no best. There is no best. Once you're in that professional range of products, you are going to find that they're pretty equivalent, but they have different characteristics. If you're a botanical artist and you love to glaze and glaze and glaze and glaze, you're going to love Sennelier paints probably, because you can glaze and glaze and glaze without getting mud or murkiness. But if you are someone who wants really aggressive granulation and you want some kind of fun special effects, you will probably want a rougher, heavily sized paper and Daniel Smith paints. That's going to be best for you, while Sennelier and a smoother paper will be best for a botanical artist. We're all different. And also, there's a lot of people that will say never use a budget supply. But if you're on a budget and you don't have a huge amount of money for paint and you want to paint a lot, using something that's more affordable will allow you to paint more and allow you not to be afraid of ruining it. Or maybe you might just feel like splashing paint around and you don't want to waste or ruin any expensive paint, because you just know if you're using the expensive stuff, you're just not going to use it. And I see that a lot. I see paints drying in the tubes. I see paper going bad on the shelf in people's studios because they're saving these papers for best. And if you won't let yourself explore on those pricey papers, it's like borrowing somebody's Ferrari to take for a spin. I don't want to borrow somebody's Rolls Royce or Ferrari to take for a spin. I'd be terrified to drive that. Same thing with papers. Sometimes a paper is too precious. It's like, I'm not going to experiment on that. I'm saving that for best. I need to experiment on something that's a little bit more affordable. Like, say, the 100% cotton B watercolor paper. It's affordable. It's good paper. Is it as good as Arches? No, but it's more affordable. And it's, for a lot of things, it's going to be just as good. It depends on the techniques you're trying to employ. It depends on how much scrubbing you're going to want to do, how much abuse you're going to give the paper. You know, that's why cheap sketchbooks have their use. They have their use for quick studies. You're not going to do a quick study on really expensive materials, on really expensive paper. Paint is slow wearing, that I think putting the investment into higher quality paint will last you longer, especially with watercolors that are so slow wearing. But paper, I mean, it's kind of a one-time use product. I also say invest in good brushes, because you can use them for years and years and years. But the paper is going to get used up. I do think paper can make a huge difference. It probably is the variable that will make the most difference in an artist and what they can achieve. But I mean, you got to listen to your heart. You got to listen to yourself. Don't let some quote unquote guru online tell you what's best for you. Only you know what's best for you. I love this shade of pink that I got here. I used some of that. It's not yellow ochre and it's not raw sienna. I can't remember what they called it. I think they called it like golden brown or something, but it's very much a raw sienna type color. In this tube set, in the pan set, it was very dull. It didn't have those pretty yellow undertones. It's very strange. But I like that color a lot. Taking that and adding it with a little of that, I think it's a pyrrole red, gave me that beautiful peachy red, pinky leg color there. I had some flicked on some water to kind of, I was expecting more of like a loose, flowy, I wanted almost to feel like the bird had just landed, and having little like bits of loose spatter or loose, bleeds of color. And I wasn't getting it. I didn't have enough water. It just wasn't going my way. I think I was a little stressed out because I was up against a deadline for another project that wasn't painting related. It was something for a freelance project I was doing, and knowing that I had to get that done, I think might have been kind of churning in my mind as I was trying to get this free flowing look to this painting. And I probably should have just done that project I had here. So I'm trying to get that paint to go, and it's not working how I like. But anyway, and I think because I had that in the back of my mind, I was very inhibited when I was painting here, and that's opposite of the look I was trying to get. I love that cobalt teal color. That's a great color. Honestly, that color is pretty in most any brand except for the new Lucas cobalt teal. That is not good. The old Lucas cobalt teal was so pretty. I was so bummed when they changed the formula on that. But That's a thing. I mean, you could love a paint, and if the company gets sold, there's no guarantee that the paint's going to be the same. You can love a paint. This is why I'm kind of nervous to review older products, because things that I've had in my stash for 15 years, and artist quality supplies, they wear slowly. And I'm kind of afraid to review some of them because it's like, what if it's not as good as it used to be? I don't worry about that so much with companies like Caran d'Ache and Derwent and M. Graham, but you never know. You never know what may have happened, who may have been sold. If you didn't know a company was sold and that they've changed some, factories, or they've changed their operations or changed their suppliers. I mean, it's hard to tell if things have changed. Stuff that I love that I recommend. Yeah, I always wonder about that. So if it's an older product, I'm very shy to review it unless I'm buying some new stash. But it's like, I don't want to rebuy what I already have, I think a good thing to do if you're getting into watercolor is if you can find a set that's got the basics, what you're basically going to need to get started out, because you are going to pay less per mil of paint if you're getting it in a set, and then ask around. Or maybe just experiment with some different brands. Like, for instance, my favorite Potter's Pink. Of course, I haven't used them all, but my favorite is my Mary Blue. It re-wets really well. It's really robust. It's got a good color payoff. For a Potter's Pink, it's great because Potter's Pink is kind of a weaker color and it's hard to re-wet from some brands. But from my Mary Blue, I love it. But there's a lot of colors that I could take or leave from, different brands. Daniel Smith has some really gorgeous granulating colors. Their French ultramarine is beautiful. A lot of their colors are beautiful. Sodalite. I love their sticks, actually. So that's something that if I know there's a granulating color and it comes in a stick, I will buy that because I know it's going to re-wet a lot easier. And that's going to make it, it's also going to be more affordable because I can buy it in a stick, and for whatever reason, they're all priced the same and they work out to be cheaper than the pigment in the tubes. So I pick and choose, and I never have a problem with working with paints together. I get asked about core paints and using that with other brands. My portable painter has core mainly, but it's got some other brands in it too, and I haven't had a problem with them overpowering other brands. They have a little more flow than other brands, but honestly, I've never found that to be a problem. Maybe it's how I paint. Maybe some people would have an issue with that depending on how they paint. We're all different, right? So don't take any guru's advice as being the end all and be all of what you should do or you shouldn't do. You've got to do what's right for you. If you find yourself unsatisfied with what you've bought, it's not meeting your expectations, even though somebody says it's perfectly good, it's great paint. Even if I've said, I like this paint, it's great, I like this paper, it's great. If it's not working for you, then it's not working for you. You need to find something that works for you. If you've got somebody saying, only use arches, use this all the time, and you're like, I want to do some fun studies that I don't worry about, and I'm too afraid to pick up the paper, then that's not the right paper for you for every aspect. You need to get something that you're not going to be afraid to paint on. And we're all different. I had this student once, and she was just such a delight. And she was an abstract painter, and she'd come to my classes, and she never painted what the group was painting. She was always doing her own thing. And she loved to paint on watercolor paper that she would buy at the grocery store. And she just loved it. And I think part of it was that it wasn't precious, and she felt like she could be free. And the techniques that she was doing probably wouldn't have changed that much on a more expensive paper. She was going to slap the paint around. She's going to work in one layer. It's going to be very free, very much like the style of John Marin, just very expressive, abstract, with maybe a little bit of a representational twist, but it was just, she was having fun. And she's like, this is what I want to do. This is what I like working on, and she wasn't going to take any guff from anybody. And I loved it. And you've got to find what those materials are for you that make you feel free, that make you feel like you want to create. I picked up this feather at the Coastal Maine Botanical Gardens when I went down there for plein air days. And I think it's a chicken feather. I didn't see any chickens around, but it was just sitting there. I'm wondering if they might release chickens at night to maybe get the ticks under control. But anyway, I picked it up off the ground and I stuck it in my little trail map thing. And then I found it later on. And my friend Karen's like, hey, feather is one of the prompts for World Watercolor Month. So I was not happy with how the bird was coming out. So I grabbed the feather and I decided to do a really quick little study of the feather. And that's what we're doing here. So I started off with that pretty golden brown color, and I painted in the part of the feathers that was not the fluffy part, not the downy feather, but more of the the silky or more of the snappy crisp part of the feather. And then I added in some dabs. It was a mix of ultramarine blue and burnt umber, I think. And I just kind of dabbed in that darker color to give it those darker flecks. And now I'm using my little bit of cut up credit card here to scrape in some of the details. And I use a credit card scraper all the time. So what I do basically is if I use up a gift card or a credit card expires, I just cut it up in a bunch of pieces. I'll throw away some of them and I'll keep the rest for scraping with a credit card. Or gold gift cards, you don't have to throw any away because once you've used it, it's gone, right? And they are just such a wonderful tool to have. And I'll tuck a few in my travel bag. I always have a few sitting around. You know, I could probably put one in every single palette I own. That's probably what I should do. Then I'm always ready, because it's so frustrating when I'm out and about painting and I don't have a cut up credit card, because it's like, I have to find a stick on the ground or something, and it's not the same. It's not as good. I don't know why I moved my palette way out in front of me, but I did. I was probably running out of space. And so now I've just kind of mixed up a really loose watery gray. It was that same burnt umber and ultramarine color. And I'm using a liner brush, just a short liner. And I'm just kind of doing these fluffy, downy feathers. Just lots of almost like scribbly, scripty strokes there. And I didn't know if I was going to show both of these pictures. At this point, I'm thinking I am not showing anybody that bird. That bird is not the word. The bird's not the word. There's a word for that bird, but I'm not going to say it here. I'll get demonetized, maybe kicked off YouTube. But yeah, I was not loving the bird. So I'm like, I gotta have something to post. It's World Watercolor Month. You don't have to do every day, but I get kind of obsessed when I start a challenge. It's like I'm going to do every day. So I wanted to have something that I wouldn't feel too embarrassed about showing. And that's what we're doing right here. This brings me to a piece of advice. And the piece of advice is, if you are not happy with a painting, move on, work on something else. Often when you give yourself a break from the painting, you give your eyes a chance to readjust, you focus on something else, you will start to forget about the frustration and the struggle that you're having with the painting. And then when you go back and you look at the original painting, you're going to see it with a truer vision, meaning you'll forget the struggle a little bit, you'll forget the battle. And when you look at it, you'll see it for what it really is. Especially if you can break away for like a few hours or even till the next day and you look at it. Oftentimes we build it up in our head as it being such a failure and it being so awful that when we come back and look at it, it's like, oh, that wasn't so bad. You know, we make things up in our heads sometimes to be much worse than they are. And so that's what I did. So I actually went and worked on the freelance project I mentioned earlier in the video. And then I came back a few hours later and I decided, well, I'm going to post this. It's World Watercolor Month. It was probably about 8 o'clock at night at this point, and I'm like, I'm not going to do really much else to it. So I grabbed a gel pen. I put the barb in on the feather. At this point, I'm thinking, I'm just showing this feather. I'm not even, I've written off the bird. So I just decided to finish the feather. But then I was like, well, you know, what have I got to lose, right? What have I got to lose? I can mess around with the bird a little bit and see how that goes. So, right here, I'm just putting in a few fine lines. And then I decided, yeah, let's go see. So first thing, I find if you get the eye taken care of, that helps. Sorry for my hand being in the way. So I filled in the eyeball and I put a line in there for the division between the two parts of the beak, the two pieces of the beak, and I accented the black tips of the wing feathers. Then I realized that pen was not where it's at. I think that pen's about ready to bite the dust. So I grabbed my Pentel Pocket Brush pen. I really like this. I'm glad I really like this because I went whole hog with this. I bought the pen that came with 2 cartridges, and then I bought a set on the same order. I didn't even wait to see if I liked the pen. I got a set of 12 replacement cartridges at the same time. But mainly it was because the pen and 2 cartridges were $7, and then a set of 12 replacement cartridges was like $8 or 7 something. It was such a deal. It was less than $1 a cartridge. I just grabbed it while I was at it to make sure that I could still get refills. I'm glad I did because I do like this. And this is a product that I would love to pick up in sepia sometime, but I haven't yet because Blick has the best price on that. And I haven't had enough for a Blick order. And also I am really trying to curb my spending a bit. So I have this, I have a ink filled. There are these, you can buy these empty pens. They're actually, they're like a fountain pen, but they've got a bristle tip. They're more, I would say they're more fine tipped than say a water brush, and you fill it with ink. And I put the Dr. P.H. Martin's Radiance Sepia ink in there, and it works so well. I actually even took the Dr. P.H. Martin's Radiance ink and put it in a fountain pen, and that's been really nice. I love sketching with that and then watercoloring over it because the lines will blur. And actually this technique, I'm thinking the look I was trying to get would have been nice done that way too. So I'm not giving up on the idea I have in my mind that's a much looser, sketchier look, but I didn't want to sketch in with a fountain pen because I've done birds with a fountain pen before and then added water to them, and that was a cool technique, but I already did a video on that and it wasn't exactly the look I was going for. But then I realized that when I did that, I just used the color from the fountain pens. I didn't actually add any watercolor to it, so that would kind of have been a new or different look. Not a new technique, I've done it before, but that probably would have worked pretty well. So maybe that'll be the next thing I try. We'll see. So I'm just adding in some detail. This is that pen I was telling you about. I think the brand is New Bestie, and I will link to it if you want to check it out. But you get a pack of 5 empty ones, and then you can put in whatever you want. I would just make sure it's something that's not going to clog. I wouldn't use like an acrylic paint or an acrylic ink, but if you use something like a dye-based liquid watercolor, that will work pretty well. And the Dr. P.H. Martin Radiance and Spectralite lines are dye-based. Their Hydrus lines are pigment-based and they would clog it, so I wouldn't use that in these pens. I do feel like I need to mention that the Radiance and Spectralite inks from Dr. P.H. Martin's are not light fast. The Hydrus liquid watercolors are light fast, but they have pigment particles. That's why they're light fast. They're made from pigments, not dyes, but they would clog fountain pen or probably one of these brush pens. So if you want to use those, I would put them in a palette and just use a regular brush that you would dip into it, and just take out a little bit at a time because they don't re-wet that well. And especially, like I mentioned, with the hard water, if you have hard water and you try to re-wet it, then you get that kind of grainy effect. So I just wanted to make a little mention about those because those watercolors are beautiful. They are a little bit pricey, so I want to make sure you're getting what's going to meet your needs. There is a handmade watercolor maker. Her shop is called Regina's Watercolors, and she actually takes the Dr. P.H. Martin liquid watercolors, the Hydrus, and she somehow has a way that she makes them into a solid pan. Now it is a very sticky pan, so you do have to be careful about that, but if you wanted something that you could just carry with you in a dry pan form, that would be a good option. Just make sure, I mean, if you live someplace humid, you are going to have some issues with it being sticky, kind of like how M. Graham is sticky and Sennelier can be sticky, but it is a good option. I'm more inclined to use those just because they are ready to go. So if you like those really vibrant colors, it's the same colors I think in their original set of 12, I believe is what she mixes from. But it's a nice option. Regina's Watercolors is the name of her website if you want to look her up. They're available in kind of like a cosmetic tin style pans and also regular half pans. So a lot of options there. It's just a small handmade paint company, and it's kind of a neat concept, especially if you like the Hydrus watercolor lines. I do. It's like the fact that I have to open up jars and put it in a palette. I'm such a lazy painter. I want to just open a palette and go. So yeah, if I'm going to use the Hydrus watercolors, I tend to. It's for a specific thing, a specific project. It's not a spontaneous type of project. But with the Radiance, I can put them right in a pen and just go from there, and that's really handy for me. You'll have to let me know in the comments whether you like the style of video or not. I was not sure if I was going to keep this real time, but it wasn't too long. I thought it might be something kind of interesting anyway, fixing a mistake. I wish my hand wasn't in the way there. But what I'm doing is I'm using that Pentel Pocket Brush pen straight up and down so I could get a little more detail and kind of sharpen up the cute little beak on that bird. And yeah, I'm just kind of adding in a little bit of shading with the sepia. That's got the liquid watercolor I was mentioning, the Radiance. And I haven't put anything in the other 4 empty pens that I have, so I've got to think about colors for that. Because it's really a neat thing to have. It's a neat thing to have. I guess if I could find a waterproof sepia that wouldn't clog, that would be a good option, but I don't know if I use them enough for them not to clog, so I don't know. I'm giving it a quick dry because I did want to go back in and add a little sparkle to the eye. And really, that's about it. A very simple little sketch here of a bird and a feather in real time. I hope you found it interesting and hope you give something like this a try. And if you're feeling frustrated that your work is not coming out the way you want it to, I hope this gives you encouragement to just keep going, because it'll get there and it might not look as bad as you thought the next day. Thanks so much for watching. Please give me a thumbs up before you go. Until next time, happy crafting. Bye!